Welcome everyone, Joe with ECRM here at our household cleaning, paper, and disposable food storage session in Chicago. And with me is Darren Seifer with NIQ, who gave a presentation called From Suds to Storage, where he really talked about how the shoppers of this category are evolving and what brands can do to better meet their needs. Very interesting presentation, so thanks for joining us, Darren.
Of course.
To start off, the household shoppers evolved over time, and efficacy is not the only thing they're looking for. Can you give an overview of how that's changed, how they've changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's been a lot of economic pressure that have been facing consumers these days. And typically when we talk about the old playbook for connecting with consumers, that's usually been the things that we've been only focused on is, okay, times are tough, so they're gonna trade down and that's that. But really what's been happening these days is the economic pressure has been showing that there are fissures elsewhere and that consumers are pointing their demands in other places. The old assumptions in the playbook were that we had one common household that and this is oversimplification, but there's one typical household that we're going after, that people have predictable routines, and that there were the linear trade-offs between what's premium and what's budget. But a lot of that is now in the past, and there's so much more, like you said, that goes into efficacy. Consumers absolutely want that, but
It's gotta work.
It's gotta work,
gotta
right?
work,
It's
yeah.
gotta work. But in this chaotic world now that we all live in, cleaning is taking on some new roles for consumers. So for many of them, it's about control, right? So when we see everything around us is starting to fall apart, cleaning is one way that consumers could take control of their personal lives. So it brings that back in. For some people, cleaning is about a ritual. It's about something they habitually do all the time as part of their weekly, daily, whatever the time period is that they do it, but they bring it in. Cleaning could be something that's now personal, so they have scents or other ways of cleaning their houses that just make it more about who they are. And also people align now with brands that are aligned with their values. And so, yeah, you've got to have something that works, but you need to think about other things that consumers are now bringing to the table when they're cleaning their homes and caring for their homes.
I love those different points that you brought up, and I thought of myself, like when the topic of control. And that's exactly me. When I'm away for a trip and bouncing from one trip to another, stuff starts getting cluttered, and it just piles up and then I have to clean it. Otherwise, I just don't feel right. It's just too messy, very distracting. And then with the identity part, like I have certain fragrances for my apartment that I love.
Yeah.
And I'm the type of person is when I find the one thing I like, I just get a whole bunch of that. It's boring, but I just stick with the one.
And that's
thing.
how you present yourself to people who come over, and that's your identity now.
Yeah,
and people will associate that with you.
Yes, definitely. To that point, a friend of mine used to work for that company called Sensi, where they make the wax melts. And over the years, from my choices of what she was able to, she's like, okay, I know what you like. You like these types of fragrances, and here, I'll recommend this. And then ultimately, I settled on the one that I just use all the time.
Yeah.
And that's me. That represents me. So you talked about 5 forces reshaping demand for household care.
Yeah.
What are they?
So again, as we've seen these economic pressures change the way consumers have changed their behaviors, there are 5 forces that are reshaping demand right now. And so the first one is about the fragmented homes. So again, the old playbook of assuming that there's the 2 adults, 2.2 kids, we need to toss that out. There are many people living alone. There are many non-related people who are living with one another. So it's not so much about there's one centralized view of the household that spreads throughout all the constituents in the home. Individuals are becoming more of a constituent. So we're fragmenting out that demand as well. Value is also being reevaluated now. So value isn't necessarily just, hey, it's a lower price than what I'm paying right now. it's also about what you get for that spend, almost like a return on investment. So the cost per use is what consumers are solving for. It's a constantly evolving equation now that consumers are trying to solve for. Control, that's one thing we kind of mentioned already, that's one thing that consumers are trying to figure out with their homes. Time optimization in the acquisition process is also very important for consumers. So are we staring at a shelf with 50 SKUs and trying to figure out, okay, which is the right one for me? We now have tools at our disposal, whether it's a search online or an AI search, where consumers can say, hey, these are the things that I'm looking for, these are the properties that I want in my home, and that makes it so much easier for the consumer to just get what they need right then and there. And also the way that the identity-driven homes are changing the way consumers are approaching things. So, if our consumers looking for more sustainable items, we are seeing growth in household care that have a sustainable claim to it, for example. And that's the way people latch onto many of these products as well, because it aligns again with their values as well. So yeah, those 5 forces, the fragmentation, value, control, time optimization in acquisition, and identity driven.
And we're both from New York. So the fragmented home, we see you were in Long Island, I'm in Queens.
I lived in Brooklyn and Manhattan as well.
So you've seen it too, yeah. Brooklyn, there's a lot of roommates, a lot of students, a lot of roommates, a lot of younger people. But in Astoria, where I am, you have families, but then you also have the roommates or people like myself. It's just me, and that's it. And so yeah, it's all different. And the way we shop, I'm a convenience guy. I'm quick. I'll usually go on Amazon, or because of where I live, I have small shops within a block of my apartment. I just run out. There's one store where I'll just get my the cleaning wipes and the Swiffer stuff, and I know it's there. It takes me 2 seconds. But then other things I might order online just because it's not available within a block.
And online is actually one of the things that's also changing the way that consumers discover and also purchase these items. When we look at just in-store for household care, the dollar sales versus last year is somewhat flat, but when we look at online sales, it's growing by over 20%.
Yeah.
And that is a sizable shift, because it's not just a few products here and there that people are buying. It's actually, when you look on average for the brands in household care, it's roughly 30-35% of their sales are coming from online.
Yeah.
And that's growing, right? And so we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar category, and that's over 30%. So yeah, this is a huge part of where people are now getting their needs met. And as we go more towards AI, the discovery is going to change there as well.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're not going in there and doing like a traditional Google search. We're saying, I need a household cleaner that's going to be effective. It's going to have these properties that I'm looking for, and it's just going to show you what met all those needs. So it doesn't matter now if it's a big brand, the size of the brand isn't what matters anymore. It's what it brings to the table.
So you have to be out there. You have to have that content everywhere on social media platforms. But also, it's got to be optimized to show up in AI summaries. And I think, and I know just from doing content for ECRM and RangeMe, there are specific things that AI summaries like.
Yeah.
Like lists and very methodical, boom, 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 boom. And then if you're not creating content to match that, you're not going to show up.
And that's what I was really talking about with the time optimization. It's again, if you're staring at a shelf and looking across 50 different products, you're going around and looking at your head's doing this, saying, oh, which one is going to be right for me? You go to an AI bot and it's going to tell you right away.
Yeah, because the store associate is not necessarily going to be available to answer those questions.
Right.
They may not know some of the details.
They might not. Yeah, they don't have the internet in their brain.
Yeah, but Claude or ChatGPT or
Right.
Gemini, they're going to make it easy for it. I see the same thing happening with food. It's like I want to make a meal and I want to use these ingredients, or I have these ingredients.
Yes.
What can I do with them?
Yeah.
So, but it's the same thing for the house. I got this issue. I need to clean this, or I need to store this, or whatever. Tell me what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about pricing? How is consumer behavior and the category shifted, and which areas are still seeing growth?
Yeah. So again, this is one of the shifts that we need to think about, how we take the old playbook away and stop thinking about how, people are going to go premium and then they're going to go back to budget. We are actually, if we were to break out throughout household care, look at items that are priced 25% above the category average, those are growing. And if we look at items that are priced 25% below the average, those are also growing. And the items that are in the middle are having trouble with growth. So, that to me says, okay, yeah, this has created a situation where consumers are open to premiumization. They want to see the value in spending more. And if it brings something to the table that they couldn't do, such as saving them time, saving them effort, that's something that they see value in. And then, of course, where trading off feels like there's not a lot to give up. They might go to a private label, they might go to another store to get a lower price for that item. That's where we also see some of the lower tier brands in terms of pricing are also finding some growth. If you're in the middle, you need to figure out what your reason for being is.
Yeah.
Because you're not necessarily saving consumers money and you're not bringing some new capability that they're looking for at the same time. So you're kind of stuck in this middle here where consumers aren't finding value in these products. So bring something else to the table that consumers could latch onto.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's almost counterintuitive, but the way you explain it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like, I know this is going to do something special for me. I'm willing to pay extra for it, and then if it's just something, that it's very commoditized, price is the factor. So yeah, that middle ground is just, you don't want to be there. You got to offer something.
Right, yeah, and again, with the risk of switching to another brand that might be lower priced, consumers might be more willing to do that. But if you have something that's unique, a scent, capability, that's also a value that consumers find. And
or brand story or something like that.
Yes,
that you resonate with.
exactly, that you latch onto. So that's something that consumers will continue to reward you with.
Okay, so when it comes to in-store, mass, club, where are they going for these products?
Yeah. So it kind of very much a value versus high-end story here again. We have seen shifts in the way that consumers are acquiring some of these products. So we've seen them reward club stores for their bigger package sizes, and they could save a little bit more on the volume price.
Yeah.
So we've definitely seen consumers moving in that direction. We've also seen consumers move towards mass stores. And again, because they're trying to get some of those lower price points. Where we see the squeeze happening is in places like food stores, drug stores. It's again, they're almost like, what is your reason here, right?
Yeah.
What are you giving consumers that these stores aren't giving you? So they're the ones who are really getting the squeeze in this.
Yeah, like in my neighborhood, I go to, it's kind of like an indie retailer dollar store, and I'll go there for my cleaning stuff as opposed to the supermarket or the drug chain, both of which are close by, but I just never really think of those when I think of cleaning. I just think of this dude around the corner.
Yeah, I mean you've got a connection with them, and they've got the assortment that you're looking for.
Yep.
So yeah, you're going to reward that. And then if you needed something, I need something a little bit more perhaps mainstream, something that I could get at a lower price at the other store because it's very similar to that one. Then sure, you'll do that. I mean, I know New York City shopping is a little bit different from a lot of other cities, but what you're describing is not too different from what we see elsewhere.
Yeah, and then you did touch on online a little bit before, but so how does that factor in online? Both whether it's social selling, like TikTok Shop, or the online e-commerce sites of retailers.
Well, for TikTok in particular, we're seeing that year over year, there's been an increase in both dollar sales of household cleaning supplies, as well as number of buyers that are getting those items through that store. So it's also a part of the online experience that has been growing, but this has also got the added twist of having influencers help consumers out with making those purchases. So, I've been saying to some manufacturers out there, maybe we should think about talking to some of these influencers because they could help drive your sales as well. It's like you don't really need to do the marketing for yourself. It's more word of mouth.
Yeah.
You gotta be careful with it, because sometimes one little wrong thing and it could go viral. So we need to be careful about this. I'm not saying just go all in, but I think there are ways that we could work with some of these influencers to get it moving through even more. Typically, when you look at the demographic profile of people on some of these social apps, they're a little bit younger, and you will find a greater concern for things like environmental concerns, where a lot of this is moving, sustainability concerns. So you can latch on to those influencers and also get the audience that you're looking for as well.
That's a good point. The younger generation, a lot of them, they're not just finding out about products on the social media platforms, but they're finding out how to use them and getting tips and tricks and along the way. So I think if brands figure out how to get to infiltrate that content, developing these user-generated pieces that where someone's explaining how to do something, but using this brand to do it.
I think the other thing that we might be able to do with social media is get ideas on how people are doing things on their own, like the DIY, right? And so, I definitely think that's part of what we're seeing on TikTok and Reels, but we want to save time at the same time, right? So if we could figure out what people are doing in terms of DIY, and then we could manufacture something around that to bring a product that will basically do that, but they cut out the time of putting all the ingredients together. I think that's another thing we should consider as well, because that's a convenience that people are looking for.
Yeah. So you wrap everything together. We're giving you instructions and providing the opportunity to purchase too.
Yeah.
And then if it's something like a TikTok where you're learning, but at the same time you can click the link right there in the content and buy it. Talk about convenience. I mean, that's that makes it easy. But also this stuff influences in-store sales too.
Yeah. Obviously there's a lot of discovery that happens. If you're not comfortable buying through TikTok Shop, you can still get the ideas from it, right? And it can bring you back to the store and say, okay, that's the one I was just looking at, right? But I still think that this brings out the calling for your traditional manufacturers in particular, is to make sure that you are coming through with an omni strategy, right? Because when you look at a lot of these challenger brands, they are starting online. There's so many fewer barriers to entry to getting to consumers by starting off online, whether it's DTC or a third party. It just is able to put it in so many hands right off the bat. And they're starting to gather a lot of loyalty through these sources. So if you're a traditional manufacturer and your omni strategy isn't very strong, I think you need to kind of ramp that up a bit more for a couple of reasons. One, that's where the biggest growth area is, as we already discussed. And it's also a great way to get discovery for your brand as well. And also to kind of, see the competition coming, you might want to be part of that competition as well.
Yeah, I think most emerging brands or new brands that I meet at ECRM sessions, they all started direct to consumer. And then because one, like you said, it's easier. Also, they get their feedback, they get their initial sales, they use their track record online to get them into the stores.
Get them into the store.
And then from there they grow, from the independents to the chains, and it just feeds, one thing feeds on another. But you have to be savvy, and the traditional brands that are not doing it, this is the next generation of brands that are coming up. So, and they're living online. So you gotta get in the game one way or another. You talked about like the different households and stuff, but you did spend some time in particular in your presentation on the single person households. What's unique about that in terms of this category?
Well, that goes back, we talk about the 5 forces, it talks about fragmentation, right? So it's not about multiple constituents within one household, where one person is going to be making the decision for them. It's that one person who's now doing it. And I think this is also part of the identity-driven demand that we're seeing, that's forcing the change in demand. So how you clean, how often you clean, the scents that you're using, that you're talking about a little bit earlier, all the choices that you make.
It's all mine. It's all my decision.
It's you. Yeah. It's all you. And again, when people come over, they could smell it and say, "Oh, this is Joe's way of presenting himself," right? So it shows who you are and to your guests. And it also, I feel like it creates an opportunity to move about a little bit more in terms of the brands that you choose. So if there's another challenger brand that comes out there, you don't have to ask anyone, you don't have to compromise. You can say, I'm just gonna try this out. So I think it gives you the opportunity to try things out a little bit more without having to satisfy anyone else's needs. So yeah,
I can be greedy in my decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're all mine. They're all mine. Speaking of challenger brands, what are they doing differently across claims and formats and discovery? And before you get into that, how do you define a challenger brand?
Well, we've been looking at challenger brands as those that have the very small share of the category, about 3.5%, right? And many of them didn't even have sales a year or two ago.
Okay.
Right. So those are the ones that we're seeing popping up. And what's in common with many of these is again they're finding their presence online. They're very much starting out in the digital world. They're being discovered that way through searches, through AI. And many of them, actually most of them, they're not coming in and saying, we're a Me Too or we're a knockoff of something that's out there already, because that's not bringing anything new. That's not going to entice people to switch over to anything. So many of them are coming in with environmental claims or sustainability claims. When we look at some of the traditional claims that are selling, the big ones that we see are about recyclable packaging, right? That's kind of now table stakes.
Yeah.
Right now, these other ones are coming in and basically saying, when these products go down the drain or when you're throwing them out into the trash, they're not going to do the perceived harm that maybe some other brands might do. So they're coming in with a little bit of a different twist around that. And the interesting thing about them is that they're not necessarily coming in at a low price. They're not coming in and saying we're going to undercut anyone. They're fairly priced. So that too, we're talking about value. It's not about being the cheapest. It's about how do you align with all those demands that consumers now have with those products.
Awesome. And also there are other properties that they're talking about outside of efficacy or sustainability. You have brand stories, their origin. Maybe they have one particular niche that they fill, some charities that they're working with. So there are other ways they seem to be really touting, other things that they're touting.
Yeah, and that's going against the identity-driven factor that consumers want to align themselves with these different things. You often see things about how, we're a family company, or this was, how I came about with this idea to bring this product to market. So there's a story behind it, and there's an emotional connection that they're making with consumers, and I think that's something that we've gotten a little away from over the years. It's been efficacy, which again, you need that, but you need to build on top of that.
I think that one of the clear ways that I've seen people identifying with these smaller brands that you don't see with the large conglomerates is they'll wear their merchandise, right? I saw like one example, a friend of mine, this is in the food and beverage space, but a friend of mine from the neighborhood is a fireman. And we have a relationship with Fire Department Coffee. So I had my friends at Fire Department Coffee send them some merchandise and coffee and a bunch of swag. A year later, I ran into this guy. He's still wearing a Fire Department Coffee hat. You're not going to see that with a Procter & Gamble. You're not going to see someone wearing a Procter & Gamble hat unless they work for them in the same way that these guys really identify with the smaller brands like that. So that's one kind of clear way that I've seen that when they really identify with the brand beyond just with the product.
Yeah. But it's not impossible for a larger brand to start getting I don't want to say cult following, because it wouldn't be small.
Yeah.
But there are ways that you could make yourselves kind of more relevant to some of these needs and some of the other younger demographics. And the traditional way of marketing though is not going to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking you need to have that presence online. You need to be on social media. You need to have the influencers make you seem hip and cool.
Yeah.
Right. And so it is possible to be done.
Yeah, definitely. So what does this mean for marketers? What should they do to really get the word out about this?
Yeah. So marketers really need to rethink what they're presenting to consumers. You don't necessarily need to reformulate or change, but you need to think about what claims you're putting onto your packaging. Again, tell everyone how well your product works, but then also tell consumers about how your product came to be. What are the, say, sustainability efforts that you're doing? What are you doing as a company? If your product maybe if it doesn't have such the best sustainable practices behind it, but what are the things that you're doing outside of your company? People want to hear about a story that relates to them and their company. Thinking about some new formats, right? So for example, in laundry care, about 80% of all the products are in liquid form. We've been used to that, we've been using that for decades, but we've seen some new things come out in the way of tiles, and sheets. And again, if they have to work, they need efficacy behind them, but they bring a new level of convenience to consumers. I don't need to measure anything and things like that. So thinking about the formats that you could bring to the table as well. You need to think about your channel strategy. We're seeing, again, consumers move a little more towards club for that volume saving and mass for the price point. So just really need to be where consumers are shifting. And again, online is a big source of that. So having your omni strategy format all set. So, tell the story, work with those 5 forces that are shaping demand, not against them.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, tell everybody a little bit about you, and you guys at NIQ have an event coming up.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So, I'm Darren Seifer. I'm the VP of Thought Leadership for Home, Family, and Baby at NIQ. I've spent the last 25 years in consumer packaged good research. So just very exciting things that are happening these days. It's really great to talk about that. But in June, we have our Consumers C360 event, we call it. And we would love for you all to join us there. It's a great meeting of the minds of thought leadership around consumer packaged goods and fast-moving consumer goods. So see you there.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you for the presentation yesterday, and thank you for joining us today.
All right, thank you so much.